more than a century, comics have been a form of entertainment. These range from Dark Horse and 2000 AD to comics that have become huge budget movies from Marvel and DC. And in Japan, manga such as Astro Boy, Devilman and My Hero Academia. But there is one comic book series that over time has become a little obscure, even though it's owned by the same company that produces both Asterix and Tintin. In this video, we will talk about a unique character that deserves to be better celebrated. Welcome to the strange and magical world of Melusine. Before we delve into the comics, let's talk about witches. The stories of witches date back to antiquity, and some of the earliest records are found in the Bible. It was between 1482 and 1782 that witch hysteria reached its heights. With the publishing of The Hammer of Witches, a guide to identifying, hunting and interrogating people accused of witchcraft, thousands of women and men were often accused and tortured, with many being hanged or burnt at the stake. Many of the iconic images of the witch emerged from this time: cauldrons, riding brooms, wearing pointy hats. Familiars, especially cats, these were seen as warnings. However, today their portrayal has been reworked, often as young women pushing boundaries and breaking rules. Witchcraft now offers a sense of control, empowerment and community. Over the years we've had a number of witches in a range of fictions, such as Wendy the Good Little Witch, Lena Inverse from the once popular Slayers franchise, Scarlet Witch from Marvel Comics, and a number of others. However, evil witches have become a lot more prevalent in the media and even outweigh the good witches. The male version, known as wizards, has a much more positive image thanks to characters in popular media like Gandalf, Harry Potter and Kamen Rider Wizard. Though there are still evil wizards to balance it out, like Saruman, Voldemort and of course Kamen Rider Wiseman. One of the earliest good wizards, and often a template for those that followed, is Merlin from the stories of King Arthur. The term magician has taken a different route over time and has become more associated with the stage. And let's not forget that the word warlock seems to have fallen out of style. So, how does all this relate? Well, before we talk about the witch, let's talk more about the original story of Melusine. Melusine is a figure of European folklore, usually depicted as half woman with one or two tails for legs, and for being famous in a number of French and English royal houses who claim to be her descendants. She is the daughter of Presine and Elinus, King of Albany, or as we now know it, Scotland. She was the sister of Melior and Palatine. Presine married Elinus, but on one condition: that he could never enter Presine's chambers at certain times. But Elinus broke his promise and she left, taking her 3 daughters with her. At age 15, Presine told Melusine and her sisters why she had left her husband. This made Melusine so enraged that she devised a plan with her sisters. They captured Elinus and trapped him within a mountain. This act would upset their mother, and she cursed Melusine, stating that on every Saturday her lower half would turn into a sea serpent. Sometime later, Melusine would meet Raymond, a French duke. The two would marry on one condition: that he would never ever see her on a Saturday. They went on to have 10 children. But the duke broke his promise. Melusine turned into a sea serpent and left their home, only returning to see her children. This mermaid Melusine can be seen today as the lady on the Starbucks logo, although they prefer to say that it's a random siren from a pirate folktale. Some versions have also appeared in other media, such as The Witcher 3, where she takes on a monstrous form, and in the Harry Potter prequel series Fantastic Beasts, where she is depicted as a witch. But the one we'll be talking about here is a trainee witch from a Belgian comic book series. Although she was created in 1992, she did not see her first book until 1995. She was created by a duo, artist Clark and writer Gibson. Melusine is published by Dupas and owned by Belgian Comics, who are known for creating works like Tintin, Asterix and Lucky Luke, all world-famous characters. The comic stars Melusine, a 119-year-old witch whose life consists of cleaning her boss's home while going to a magical academy to practice witchcraft. Here she ends up having a number of wacky, comedic adventures with her friends and extended family. But she's no pushover. If you cross a line, she'll use her magic on you. She lives in a castle which is owned by Count Gonzaga Henry Vans and his wife Duchess Amy d'Aupassant. Count Gonzaga is a vampire who loves to lounge around, drink blood and eye up other women. Nevertheless, Gonzaga stalks his victims for their blood. As a result, he often parties with his vampiric buddies. Meanwhile, his ghost wife, Duchess Amy, is a strict and no-nonsense spirit. Amy despises her husband for being lousy while ordering Melusine around. Other residents are Winston, a Frankenstein-type monster who is the butler for the castle. He also has a crush on Melusine. The mad scientist Dr. Cartofine, first introduced in volume 11, Melusine and the School of Witchcraft. He commandeers the castle because his great-grandfather lived in it once and created Winston. Other than them, other creatures consist of a mummy, ghouls, and living suits of armour. Outside the castle we meet a number of Melusine's family members who visit from time to time, such as Adrazel, Melusine's wacky and unpredictable aunt. You're never sure what kind of mood she's going to be in. Sometimes friendly, violent, smart, stupid, all at the same time. She does care for her, but others had better beware. There's also Melusine, a fairy who is supposed to be Melusine's cousin. And like her and the rest of the cast, she's not very bright, likes pink, summons cakes, and sometimes gets herself into trouble by accident. But she has been known to lose her temper at times. At the school we meet some of her friends such as Kankaloon, a very determined witch who wants to do well but is incredibly clumsy. She constantly messes up spells and always crashes when flying on her broom. Alongside her is Crapella, a friend to Melusine, who lives in a treehouse. She fancies boys and dresses in the skimpiest fashion. In fact, there was a skit that was dedicated to why her and Melusine dress differently. And then there's the others, such as Nomulu, a little red demon character who appears from time to time along with a gnome named Perlecred. There's also Tifazuli, and who can forget the duo that is young Abraham Lincoln and Billy the Kid. While in the school, we also meet her teacher, Mr. Hasselblad, a no-nonsense teacher who can sometimes overstretch and cause disasters with the spells, mostly to himself. This usually suspends the lesson. And Mr. Perluscovar, a man with a disfigured face and known for coughing up a number of insects, all half dead. Even though Melusine has many friends, she has a few enemies as well, such as the reoccurring figure of the Inquisitor, an angry religious priest who has been known to lead a number of violent mobs to terrorize Melusine and her friends, but with little or no success. And there are others such as random villagers and other kinds of weird creatures in this strange world. A majority of the comics are self-contained skits that range from 1 to 3 pages. Each comic book has a theme which is brought together at the end of each volume. But as the series continues, the stories start to have a connection, and by the last few novels, they are one long narrative. The stories are comedic, where characters sometimes get into weird and wacky adventures that usually leave them either hurt or dumbfounded. We can see this, for example, in Volume 10, where during a game, Melusine accidentally squirts the Count with holy water. While in Volume 5, Melusine learns that she can't make everyone happy with her spells. In most of the volumes there would be a number of short stories, followed by a longer story. But in Volume 19, the entire book is one long narrative. One exception to the comic book layout occurs in Volume 4, which is illustrated more like a prose novel. Another thing to notice is the change of design of Melusine over time. Through the book she changes and her look becomes much more sophisticated, and she starts to look older. In the first 5 volumes, Melusine has a large forehead and is more cartoonish, similar to the old Mickey Mouse animations. Also, her dress seems ill-fitting, and her hat seems out of proportion to her head, all leading to the effect of being younger and more childlike. Through volumes 6 to 8, her design is smoother. The brim of her hat is wider than before, and she even looks a little taller, despite being the same size and age as in the previous novels. The large forehead is gone, and her body language is awkward, but she has more facial expressions. Another subtle change in volumes 9 to 11 is that her body has an anatomically correct structure, but now, when she's conjuring a spell, a shadow appears over her face and her eyes turn white with no pupils, something that disappears in later volumes. This only appeared during her conjuring of demonic forms, indicating that she was much more confident with her new powers. From volume 12, Melusine is drawn in a fuller figure, similar to an older teenager, and the colouring of the comics makes her clothes look lighter. Within another 4 volumes, she is taller once again. The colouring goes for a darker tone when the characters are outside, compared to well-lit environments. In the last 9 volumes, we see her final reworking. Her figure is fuller, with the shading on her hat and clothes adding both depth and weight, and her facial expressions move from comedic to more serious. It's clear that with every volume, Clark wanted to improve on the design until he got the perfect result, while sticking to the core art similar in style to both Tintin and Asterix. So, how do you get hold of Melusine comics? Well, if you live in France, there's no problem. She has made many appearances in the popular magazine Spirou, and you can even get the individual novels, but of course all in French. But if you're waiting for the translations into English, you will find it hard going. On Amazon.co.uk, 5 volumes have been translated, but are chronologically all out of order. They were translated by Cinebook, but it seemed they were not very interested in doing the whole series. Surprisingly, there was an online game. However, it seems that the website page has been deleted. There is also a CD disc that was a bonus release with the 4th volume of the series. The disc itself contains 8 tracks full of original songs. There is a link in the description that leads to a YouTube channel where you can listen to all the tracks. If you want to own a figure of Melusine, there is a pewter version on La Marque Zone that came out in 2007, and also a PVC bendable figure that came out in 1997. However, there aren't many options for your wallet. If you're up for a visit to Belgium, take a trip to the Jason station. Here you will find a number of characters from the Spirou magazine covering the station walls. You'll also find a plaque dedicated to Melusine there. And if you're wondering what the artist Clark is up to, he has a website called Clarkorama to show off his projects. You can also find a number of interviews with him on YouTube, but they are in French, and sadly there are no language subtitles. Although Melusine has got her fans, there have been a number of controversies, such as the semi-nude depictions of her in a number of volumes. Melusine can be seen without any clothing, alongside her female friends. Some would argue that this contributes to the male gaze, and this is just the artist being a bit of a perv. Others could say that this is empowering to women. Also, the European attitude towards nudity is on display at every art gallery or museum in France. And there is a small majority that would argue that this is more to do with the culture of the country. Another issue is to do with her niece. In volume 15, The Witch's Apprentice, Melusine is greeted by her half-sister, Pirulune. While Pirulune is going to look for a male companion, she leaves Melusine to look after her daughter, Melusine. Due to Melusine's spiteful character and childish attitude, she becomes a lot of trouble for the others, even when she gets what she deserves. However, there was a chance within the comic to show Melusine and Melusine bonding, but sadly this was tossed aside, making Melusine one of the most hateful characters in the series. Then we head to volume 22, Cankalune. In this volume, Melusine tries her best to help Cankalune, but when she causes another accident, Melusine is blamed for it and is sent to be burned at the stake. Feeling guilty about what happened, Cankalune ends up taking her own life, unaware that Melusine survived the stake. Melusine finds out what happened and travels to hell in search for her. She finds Cankalune's soul, but after all the problems she has caused, Cankalune tells Melusine to go live a good life and then fades away. If you are having any thoughts about the kind of act, call 116-123 or text SHOUT to 85258 and remember that you are not alone. Death is not a new concept to the Melusine universe. There are many kinds that may get different reactions, from hangings, suicides and acts of karma to becoming living food. It's true that some of these deaths can come off as grotesque rather than funny. Melusine becomes darker and more thought-provoking, especially when it comes to volumes 26, Pink and Black, and volume 27, War Without Magic. But then we come to the biggest controversy, that not only concerns the series, but is a problem that has been with the company for many years. There are many forms of depicting people in comedy, usually in a stereotypical fashion, that we as people can relate to, though some would raise an eyebrow at some depictions. We must keep in mind that the character in the pages or on screen is a singular person and does not represent the whole race. This is where the biggest controversy comes into play: the depiction of black people. Belgian comics have been publishing a large number of comic books since the late 1920s. Their headquarters are located in Belgium, originally an imperialist country which conquered many countries including the Congo, which they renamed the Belgian Congo. Like other imperial powers, the people in these countries were enslaved, and it took many years to free these nations. The Belgian Congo is now renamed as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Throughout this period, racist attitudes were part of Western culture, in books, movies, and even comics. Belgian comics conform to these ideas. These stereotypes can be found in many of their titles, including their most famous Tintin books. For many years, Tintin was praised for his numerous stories that were fun and action-packed, which have been adapted into cartoons, a CGI film, and a live-action movie, all except for one story, due to its offensive nature. In Tintin's adventures in the Congo, many of these negative images can be found, including characteristics that you would never expect a character like Tintin to have. Meet Hergé, the creator of Tintin, and now meet his producer, Norbert Wallace, a priest, journalist, editor, particularly of the newspaper Le Vignette Siècle, and Hergé's publisher. While Hergé created the stories, Wallace was the one in control and demanding changes. Hergé wanted to write a Western-style story, but Wallace wanted politics included. This resulted in stories like Tintin's adventures in the Congo, where the necessity of white rule was propagated. Years later, Hergé stated his regret for writing that story. However, one man, Venu Mabu Tom Andando, took the publishers of Tintin to court, attempting to get his adventure in the Congo banned.
Tintin orders the whole village around. He behaves like a colonial ruler. He says, "Get to work," but the villagers are tired and don't want to. Tintin asks them if they're not ashamed to let his dog work alone. And his dog says, "Get going, you lazy slobs." Even the dog insults the black people.
Although he failed, a new introduction is now included, explaining to modern readers how these views were a product of the time in which it was written and drawn.
Of
course, it's slightly colonialist, but it's also kind and well-meaning. It's a positive book in the spirit of its times. Now, 80 years later, the countries of Africa are independent, and the points of views of both white and black people have changed anyway.
Many people blamed Hergé for the negative stereotypes, but his editor-publisher interfered with his work. It seemed that his publisher had the last word.
Thundering typhoons.
Which brings us back to Melusine. In volume 26, Pink and Black, Melusine receives a message that her mother Sigurd and father Caspar are divorcing due to an incriminating photo of her father with another woman. Her father says that this is not him, and that both people in the photo are shape changers. This leads Melusine and Melisande to find her mother, where the two will discover dark secrets about their past. In pages 8, 9 and 10, a number of Melusine's friends are bullying a new student. Melusine flies in to help the poor soul, and this is where the stereotyping begins. The student, Mathis, is in training, but his design embodies the stereotypical image of a witch doctor. It is not a cruel stereotype, but it is still noticeable. This imagery is also carried through to Mathis' father. Mathis becomes friends with Melusine, and in gratitude helps her find the location of her mother. Through this comic, we also get a glimpse of another stereotype, this time of Asians, mostly Chinese. It also appears in volume 25, The Year of the Dragon, and gets even worse in volume 26, The War Without Magic. In volume 26, Melusine's father declares war on the fairies. Here there are two factions, witches, wizards and dwarves, against the fairies, dragons and Chinese. The dwarves are rivals of the Chinese, and the story is racist towards them. There is a clear sign of the company sticking to the past in the artist's work. Other races are used for comedy effect. In volume 12, Beauty and the Beast, a World War I German helmet can be spotted in Dr. Kottovstein's laboratory. In some other comics, the Nazi swastika is used as a joke to censor out really bad words. The company has made fun of Nazis and the invasion of France and other European countries. However, both world wars couldn't have happened in Melusine's medieval fantasy world. This just shows the wacky sense of humour of both the artist and the writer. But even with this, we must not forget the positive that Melusine has brought. She is a Belgian comic's first female lead character, who brought laughter, fun and wacky adventures, and has been an inspiration to many young girls. If you're interested, then share this video around. Perhaps there's a chance to bring Melusine back into the limelight, so that we can all enjoy her adventures together.